NRL Fantasy is back for 2025, and there's been a big change to the rules that's going to impact your buy round planning. Now, this doesn't come into effect until round 12, so it's not a major thing to think about at the start of the year, but it is definitely something to consider when it comes to planning out your players and your trades around that origin period. So we're going to talk about all that today, the implications of those rules, and we're going to talk about some pods as well, who we like too. Before we get into that, though, I've got Barbie on the show, a friend of mine from the Renegades group. And somebody's been around fantasy for about a decade now. Now, Barbie, you finished 300th last year. Best ever finished top 200, and you're a proud Warriors fan.
Yeah, funnily enough, Longy, I've got the Warriors tipped to be in the top 8 this year.
Mate, that is outrageous. Warriors top 8. That I don't know if I can keep you on after that. Look, we'll push through. We'll push through. Anyway, let's get right into this. So we've got the rule change. So the big thing you guys need to note is the major buy rounds for this year, which is for the origin weeks. They're the weeks where half the teams are missing, and they are rounds 12, 15, and 18. But the big thing to note is the minor buy rounds, which are after those. They're also being reduced in terms of your squad size. So last year during the major buy rounds, you had your starting 13 playing, right? So this group here, what happened was that 4 interchange spots didn't count. What's being added in here is in those minor buy rounds, so the second week after Origin, you also don't have to play your interchanges. So it just means that you only need to play a starting 13 in rounds 12, 13, 15, 16, 18, and 19. So that's the big thing to keep in mind there. But that has big implications for fantasy because we start looking through here. Round 12, this is a major buy round right here. So a bunch of teams missing out. But in a round like round 13, this is when Origin players will be backing up. You have most of the teams playing. You're only missing a few squads, right? So Sharks, Dolphins, Bulldogs are out. And then a couple of Origin players won't back up. So you're not going to be as pressed during that week. Now, Barbie, does that change how you're preparing for the Origin period?
I think it does. Like there is a little bit more flexibility now with this. I feel because you can keep a lot more Origin players.
Yep.
So the guys like Haas, Yo, Cleary. Now, especially with the Panthers draw, like there could be a world where you keep all 3 of them, have 3 million in your bench, and still be able to play a pretty good 13. So, yeah, there's having a look at it. Like there are some teams that could be a bit more trickier to hold. For example, the Roosters, they've got 3 buys between, I think it was like round 11 to 19. So what that means is you've got 3 buys plus another 3 major and 3 minor where you only need to field 13 players. So is it worth keeping the likes of Crichton or Watson? Who knows?
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think the other thing it brings into play here is you potentially have the ability to take a strategy from the NFL fantasy leagues and run the handcuff model. So basically what that means is you carry the backup of a certain player. So if you've got, let's say you've got someone like Nathan Cleary and Brad Schneider's available. He's been playing off the bench, so he's minimum price. This is just a hypothetical here. You could potentially carry Cleary through this period and carry Brad Schneider on your bench. And if Cleary's out, you only need to replace that starting spot. So you bring Schneider in. So it brings that strategy into play as well, which is a way that you can use your cash outs pretty effectively to sort of minimize the amount of trades you're using and still cover those buy periods. So I don't mind that as an approach. Is there anything else for you, Barbie, that it changes in terms of your approach?
I think holding trades is going to be more interesting now because a lot of coaches, me included, you would have burnt all your trades by round 19 and you only left with 8 in the back end. That is okay, but once you get to round 25, round 26, there is a lot of, you are in a world where Cleary, Panthers could have got the minor premiership, or Jerome Hughes could be rested, and the teams with a couple more trades up their sleeve, they will definitely climb up the ranks. Whereas, so that's made NRL Fantasy a lot more interesting, and I think that's the main reason they may have brought this in, just to ensure that teams are going right through to round 27, because last year there was a very tight gap in that top 50, and it was really hard to break into that top 100 in the back half of the year. So yeah, injuries will play a key part in this, I think.
Mate, I agree with you there. And just so you guys know too, the way we actually started connecting about getting on a podcast together, Barbie posted, it was a buy planner, right?
Yeah. So I did like a buy spreadsheet because I'm a bit of geek that way with accounting and all that. But yeah, last year I had a buy planner where that was a lot more technical because you did have to hold certain players. For example, Samuel Fainu from the West Tigers. A lot of teams held him from round 12 because West Tigers didn't have a buy till round 26. He may only be scoring 35, 40 points, but now you've got a lot better players that you could potentially, if you get the money, you hold them and still put them on the bench for those rounds 13 and round 19 buy if they have it, rather than keeping the long-term prospects. So yeah, the buy planning is, I feel like you'll still end up using some sort of spreadsheet, but it's not going to be as detailed.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for your spreadsheet, man. You can send it across. Now, one of the things we can talk about today too is some of our options in terms of pods. So, look, we've both got a few written down. I know you guys have been hungry for some pods. Barbie, I'll throw to you first. Who's a player who's on your list?
So I got Turbo. He's quite up there. At the moment, I'm tossing up between Turbo and Ponga. As you can see, Turbo's
7.4% ownership because Ponga's about 20%. That's a big gap.
Yeah, Ponga is quite high, and both I noticed Manly have a pretty good draw at the start. I think out of their first 7 rounds, they've got 5 home games, and then one of their games is technically at a neutral venue. I think it's in Perth. So if Manly start off hot, they could be a team to target, especially because they don't have a bye till later on. But Ponga's the other one. In a world, there could be a possibility that I start with both Ponga and Turbo, but I'll have to find ways to make that work in terms of cash.
Yeah, those fixtures for Newcastle are red hot, man. I'm with you there. And that actually leads into my pod here. Bradman Best.
Yeah.
And I think he was about 1.9% ownership when I first said his name. I'm not claiming this, but he's gone to 3.7% now. It's a concerning trend, but it's one that it was inevitable. Now, Bradman Best, great run of fixtures for Newcastle to start the year. You've got that Tigers matchup round 1. He scored like 99 points against the Tigers last year. So I look at that and I just think, yeah, that's a guy that I might want into my team. Look, 582K and priced at a 43. I think there's a world where he could be a 50 average center, potentially even higher than that if he goes on the right run of form. And last year, if you take out those first 5 weeks and you take out the injuries, he was close to a 60 average. Now, he's not going to average 60. He's definitely not going to average 60, but it just shows that capability he has to bust out massive scores. And if he can keep busting out those sorts of scores and Newcastle can start the year hot, and if, the halves can just sort of shovel the ball onto Ponga, then he's going to get a ton of ball and he's going to score a ton of points. I'll throw back to you, man. Have you got another thought on Best there, or do you want to jump to the next pod?
Yeah, well, Best was on my radar as well, and he's definitely one I'm closely considering. One thing I did note, though, is with Ponga in the team, Best averaged around 35, 36 last year. Without Ponga, he averaged 57, 58. Now, that could just be the lack of ball that he was getting, but with Ponga on that, I think he's on the right edge. There is definitely a world where he could start scoring those 50s and 60s, especially with the draw that they've got. The thing that frustrates me with the Knights is their halves combo. Like, I'm still not a big fan of what they're planning to do at the moment, but yeah, I'm also a bit of a risky. I like to take the risk pod, so yeah, the one with the higher upside. I think last year Farnworth was similar, so yeah, could be a good shout here.
Yeah, man, I was on Farnworth so fast last year too. Like, he was absolutely fantastic. Just throw me another pod, man. Who have you got in mind?
So another one I had, well, he's actually low owned, but I don't know if he's going to be a pod too much longer. It would probably be Alex Seyfarth.
Seyfarth.
Yeah,
Wow.
so if he gets that spot on the edge, he's averaging 10 points above what he's priced at. So he could be worth, the thing that happened last year, which could potentially happen this year, is we had a lot of 60-minute edges. The guys in the round 1, I started with Wong and Tuapanua, and they both only played 55, 60 minutes. But I'll be interested to see how they go into trials. The other thing is there are definitely a couple of locks you already have in the Tigers, and May and probably Royce Hunt. So how much more Tigers do you want in your team is probably another question. But
yeah. I mean, you don't want 6 players from the reigning Wooden Spooners.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I've got
Seyfarth's an interesting one, by the way. So with him, yeah, like statistically, it makes tons of sense, right? He is that mid-40s guy when he gets this role, and it looks like there's not a lot of competition other than maybe a Ruben Porter who could come in. My one concern with Seyfarth is he has had this opportunity a number of times at the Tigers, and he has never converted it to more than a few weeks to a month of productivity. Just never seems to lock down a spot. He's a guy that plays with a hot head, so he can do great things on the field, but also just totally lose his mind. With
absolutely, yeah.
Seyfarth, I mean, the stat case you're making makes sense. I just rather not buy into it. That's sort of where I sit on him, but I totally get what you're saying from a stat perspective, and um, he could easily just come out and average 45 for the first 10 weeks, and then you move him on during the origin period. So that could be a shout. I'm going to throw another pod in here, and this may not stay potty that long. So Cam Murray, 2.6% ownership, very, very low ownership. He is potentially a chance for round 1 now. I would say that 2.6%, by the way, 2.5% of them are very casual and don't know he's injured. So, I'm really thinking like he would be the pod of pods. If he is a late inclusion round 1, no one else would own him. And he's a guy who can pop out an 80-point game here and there. So I look at him and go, look, I don't want to do it. I'm probably not going to do it. But if you wanted to take a gamble and you really like Cam Murray, you're never going to get him at this low ownership ever again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started with Cam Murray last year. So I'm leaning towards probably holding just because of the stack mids at the moment. But he is one I had on the radar because he, especially with him being potentially 5 points underpriced, he could. And the Rabbitohs now without Damien Cook as well, there could be a little bit more work that he needs to do, especially early on. But the other thing, one of the things I did learn from last year that I want to implement this year is I don't like to start with players that have an injury cloud or had just come off an injury. So guys like Payne Haas is another one that I really wanted. I had him in my team until last week, but now I've got rid of him at the moment just because with an ankle injury, a half Payne Haas is just not worth, especially for that price, depending on the price they are at. So yeah, another one I did have in
there, man. Like guys like Haas, Latrell Mitchell, they're the types of guys where they're unstoppable if they're on. But if there's an injury there, you just can't mess with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then like another one I had at the moment, which potentially is a pod, is probably Matt Burton. So he's one that I'm looking at quite closely because the way Fogarty played last year and now with Matt Burton, especially if Sexton is his half pairing, he has the potential to be doing most of the kicking, but we're talking 80-20 kicks goals. And at the moment, I reckon he could be. I mean, if Nico Hines is averaging 60, I can't see why Matt Burton can't be doing the same, especially if he starts hitting a few more tackles.
Dude, I've been on the Burton Express for a couple of years now, just thinking he was going to take that leap. He's going to take that leap at some point. Yeah. This could be the year. Look, at a 53 average, you're not going to get much worse than that. The running game is good too for Matty Burton as well. So when he's doing that, it's great. 2.8% ownership is insanely low. But we talked about this in our halves analysis, and he is a guy who, on paper, could be the number 2 half in fantasy. Probably not number 1. I'm going to give Cleary that respect, but could be the number 2. He could usurp Nico Hines. He could move ahead of, Jerome Hughes, Mitch Moses, all these sorts of guys. He could be anything, really, Matt Burton. Yeah. So, I don't mind that as a pod at all. And my lights have gone out, which is probably a sign that Burton's not the option that we want. I'm going to drop another guy in here, and we'll go one more each. Quick fire here. John Bateman, 7.7% ownership. He's still got his Tigers jersey on his picture, but he's going to the Cowboys. He's a guy who's averaged between the mid-50s to 60 marker when he's been a starter in the rugby league. So I look at him and I go, last year, that was a bad year, right? He's priced at 44. His role at the Tigers was inconsistent. The Tigers just weren't feeding their back rowers. Isaiah Papali'i is in exactly the same boat. He goes to the Cowboys now, which is a fantastic situation for edge back rowers. And he's a guy that's sitting in my team right now. Whether I start with him depends on the 80-minute role. But I don't mind the idea of John Bateman.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree because I've got him as one of my guys at the moment. That especially if he's plays the Cowboys' role of they're looking to potentially use him as starting edge, and then when Cotter comes off, he could go into the middle, and when Bateman goes into middle, he averages those high 50s, and that's easily 10 points of value right there. I had him last year. I got him at this price. He hit a couple of 60s, but then he did get that pick injury. But
Dude, we got him at the same time. Same thing. We don't learn our lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the edges as well, while I'm talking about it, I feel that's where the pods are in edges or centers because everyone's going to have a Cleary, everyone's going to have a Mamazalis, everyone's going to probably have a Sandon Smith. So all those, so your
Isaiah
pods
Yonge,
are
all these guys.
Isaiah Yonge, so your pods are gonna probably be in the edge area, and Bateman is definitely one I'm eyeing up, especially if he's named at starting edge. And yeah, depending on the bench they've got.
He's a scorcher, mate. So give me your last pod here. Who are you going to pick?
I've got to give a Warriors player. I've got to go Luke Metcalf. He's
Metcalf. Yeah, this is a SJ. What are you tipping here?
Well, without SJ, I feel you're going to have Tamari Martin and Metcalf starting in the halves. There has been talk around Boyd. Boyd, I feel, will be a backup. Tamari Martin will likely be the halfback, and you've got Metcalf kicking goals. He will definitely get at least an extra 4 or 5 points there. That average of 33 includes a couple of games where he did get injured early. So I think he's at the moment around 37, put in a couple more goals and potentially some more attacking stats. He could be in that low 40s sort of guy. It's not a keeper stage, but definitely one that I'm looking to start with if he's named at 6 and you've got Martin at 7. But if Boyd's at 7, then that's probably a no-go for me because Boyd will probably end up doing most of the kicking and goal kicking. But yeah, he's definitely one that I've got on the radar. Got to have a Warriors guy. So yeah, Mitch Barnett might be another one.
He's a freak too, man. Like he's one of those guys who he can break off a try from anywhere. So the Warriors are a team that they've lost a few guys. They've lost Fanua Blake, Tohu Harris, Sean Johnson. They're going to be looking for some points, and Luke Metcalf's going to be a guy that's trying to step up for them. So if you like Barvey and you think the Warriors are making the top 8, then you probably have to own Metcalf. I personally, I'm not having as much faith. I'm sorry, my friend. I'm not sure about the Warriors, but Metcalf, if he gets the goal kicking, $441K for a goal kicking half who has explosive upside, I'm in it with you. I think that's a great shout. Barvey, thanks for jumping on today, man. Thanks for helping us explain the rules. Now, we're going to keep Barvey involved in terms of the buy planning guys as well. So he's got a great buy planning spreadsheet. We'll go through that closer to Origin. But otherwise, thanks for jumping on, man.
No, thanks, Longy. Thanks for having me.